Tyler the Lover, and welcome to How to Be Samoan, the podcast. How to Be Samoan is a podcast about Samoans sharing their Samoan identity stories. If you saw in our last episode, I told you my story as a Samoan trying to find my identity. And today I have a guest, Brenda Paraha, and she's going to share with us her story as a Samoan. Just a side note, Brenda is my older sister. She looks younger, but she's my older sister. I think I look younger. And so I'm going to pass the time to Brenda to tell us her story.
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I think, obviously, I've watched the first episode. And it was interesting to me to follow along with what you shared, because my view of your life, even though we're like sisters, was slightly different. And it's not, all the things are the same. I remember all, like, when we moved to Australia, when we went on that holiday to Samoa as kids, and all of those things. And I remember you going off to college, and even when you moved to Samoa as a teenager, it was weird that you were like, oh, because they send naughty kids to Samoa. I actually didn't think that was part of it, and I just thought that you were lucky. I also wondered why I didn't get asked to go. Maybe I wasn't, I don't know. It was just strange. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I remember, and I recall them the same way that you do. I think in the context of like this whole podcast and what your aim of it is in terms of having your Samoan identity and how that resonates in your life, or, you know, what is it to be Samoan, right? Like how do you be Samoan? I think my take on it is that our parents were Samoan, so automatically that's your identity. You are a Samoan. That's what you were born into, so therefore that's what you are. And I think for me as a kid, I always just held it that way. We didn't speak Samoan in our home because we lived here in Melbourne. But Mum did try to talk to us in Samoan, and I remember that a lot. Sorry, my voice is just croaky. I remember there were common phrases that Mum would say, and it's not so much like to tell us off, but if you heard it, you knew that you were getting in trouble. Or, you know, just little things. You would hear Mum speak to her siblings on the phone, or even when Grandma called, and she would have those conversations in Samoan, and I was always fascinated by it. To some extent, I kind of understood what was going on. Like, I understood what they were saying to each other, but I could never say it back. And funnily enough, Mum said that when we were little, and because we did go to Samoa as like children, babies, she said that we were actually quite fluent in Samoan, which kind of makes me a bit sad, because I'm like, I really wish that I still had that ability, I suppose. It's now, to this day, I still can understand when people are speaking in Samoan. If they're speaking really fast, I kind of struggle, but even to some extent I can read it and kind of know what the words mean, but I'm still struggling with the whole responding back in Samoan. So yeah, the way that we were raised probably has a lot to do with that. But as a kid, I always knew that I was Samoan, because Mum always told us that that's where we were from. We weren't from here. It was it was pretty obvious that we weren't from here. Back in the 80s, Melbourne, as much of a melting pot and a multicultural place that Melbourne is now, and even back then, the multiculturalism didn't really extend so much to Pacific Islanders, and the other cultures were the cultures that you would see most commonly were, like you said, Greek, Italian, and Asian, Maltese, and there were we actually had some Chilean friends, Chilean, and families that we knew through church. So multiculturally, yes, there were different cultures, but I felt like, were we the only Samoans that lived here? It was just one of those things. We didn't see a lot of Samoans or Pacific Islanders, if you will, around. Indigenous Australians were living in the place that we lived in at the time, in Clifton Hill, and Collingwood, in that area. The funniest experience I remember was when we were looking, I don't know if you remember this, but when Mum had decided that living in Clifton Hill was no longer safe for us, there was an incident that happened in the flats. She decided this is no longer a safe space, and she figured out a way, or she spoke with some community people around how to get housing through the Housing Commission in another area that she deemed to be a safer place. And you know what? It was the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, you know. She did pretty good. She got us there, and we lived there probably through our really formative years, so like as teenagers and stuff. But again, there were not a lot of people that looked like us in our neighbourhood. But the experience of looking at, there was a townhouse unit, and we went to check it out. So there were 2 properties that they had offered my mum, and we went to check out this one place. It was a townhouse. It was in a group of townhouses, and as we pulled up, we're laughing because it was hilarious at the time. So we've pulled up, my mum's driving, my aunt is in the front seat, and there's the 3, me, my sister, and our brother Aaron in the back seat. And as we pull up, these little Australian kids on their bikes speed off down the road in their bikes screaming, the Chinese are coming! The Chinese are coming! And I mean, I suppose we do have Chinese ancestry in Samoa, so I suppose maybe we did look Chinese to these kids, but like that just speaks to the fact that people didn't look like us in this neighbourhood. And incidentally, we did not take that place. Mum had the presence of mind to accept the property that was in Box Hill North, and it was a standalone home. It was 3 bedrooms, which Mwena spoke to already, and we lived there, and we were really blessed to live there. And okay, so then let's talk about the trip back to Samoa when we were kids. So if you were like 7 or 8, then I would have been around 9 or 10. Yes, we had been to Samoa before when we were kids, and we knew that because that's what our parents had told us, and obviously we knew that our family was there, and we would speak to family members in Samoa all the time, obviously on the phone. Back then we even had telegrams. Oh my gosh. And we would get telegrams. So anyway, we went on this trip. It was the first time Aaron had ever been to Samoa, and he was still pretty little. What was he, like 4 or 5 at the time? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's right, because he started school when we got back. Yeah. So the 3 of us and Mum went back to Samoa, and it felt, to me it was like, yeah, we're going on holiday, but also a bit like we were going home, even though we'd never lived there. Like, I don't know, as much as we'd spoken about being Samoan and we knew that that's our heritage and that's where we're from, and Mum always spoke about Samoa, I always felt like that's home, that's where I'm from. And even to this day, I still feel like I gravitate towards it, even though technically I've never actually lived there. I've only holidayed there myself. Yeah. So I was excited. I was rapt. I loved being there. For obvious reasons, the weather is amazing in Samoa. Very hot. But also I felt like it was exciting for me to meet family members. One of the things that I have observed living away from family and having only your very immediate, so my siblings and our mum, to me, I always felt like I was missing something. Like, where I know of all of these people that I am related to. I've got a bunch of cousins, but I've never actually seen them, and we don't have that regular interaction or contact. And so I really craved that, and being able to go home and meet them, like on Mum's side of the family, my cousin Liana and Tui and Stephen and Uncle Hugo, and like just all of these people, being able to spend that time with those cousins, that was really special to me. And then the other side of the coin, obviously being raised by our mum, but we still had another side to us, which was our dad's family. So the lack of contact there, because you've got a split family, and also in an age where there was no digital, like it wasn't a digital age. Like we're talking the 80s. You don't even have mobile phones at that point. And so, it was really hard to keep in touch and to be in contact and to really build a relationship or have conversations with. And for me, that was something that was missing. And I don't want to speak for you guys, and certainly not for Aaron, but for me, I really craved that. So meeting my dad's parents, and spending that time with them in Malifa, and also Grandma Elena and all the uncles and aunties that were there. I remember meeting up with our first cousins, Songa, Arai, Rita, and then even Manfred and Neil. Like those were some really special times. They just happened to be in Samoa around that time, and also Ramses, and like just these cousins that we never get to see, and would never, like, not knowing when we would ever get to see them again. Like that was really big for me. Like that was really special. I knew I have my siblings and they were always your ride or dies. But knowing that you've got these other people that are your people, like, we're relatives. It was amazing. So that was really special for me. There were lots of experiences that happened. Like we went, obviously you go to the beaches and all of those things, but I think for me, that part was really special. So when I think about being Samoan, one of the other things that I think was lacking for us, and I'm not sure if this is the same for other people that have been raised in other countries, but for me, Samoa is not a well-known place, or it definitely wasn't back then. And I remember it was easier to say, like when I was trying to speak in context of being from Samoa, people would be like, what? From where? And for some reason, they knew where Fiji was. So I would say, do you know Fiji? So when somebody said to you, where are you from? I would say, well, I'm from Samoa. And they'd go, where's that? Is that near New Zealand? I said, well, I was born in New Zealand, but I'm actually from Samoa, which is another island. And if you know where Fiji is, Samoa is around there. That's how I would explain myself. That's how I would, you know, almost pose who I, like, my identity is wrapped up in this island that you've never heard of. And in order to get you to understand that, I have to speak to another island that I've never been to. So it's just like crazy to me. And still, even now to this day, I still sometimes have that issue. Especially if you say Samoa the way that it's supposed to be said, unless you say it as Samoa. People really don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, that's, I guess when I'm talking about my identity as a Samoan, or how to be Samoan, being Samoan for me is, it's just who you are. Like, that's what you're born into. So it's not about being a certain way. I think some of the things that have happened in our lifetime, and you'll hear this, oh, you're a Fia Balangi, or you are a Balangi because you were raised somewhere else. And it's almost an accusation when people say it to you. I don't know if you get that, but I always feel like I'm being accused of something. Well, you're not even a real Samoan because you're Balangi, because you don't know how to speak it. It's like,
kind of like derogatory.
Yeah, absolutely. They're trying. I don't think that they necessarily. No, actually, no, they do mean it that way.
They do mean it that way.
They do mean it that way. And sadly, it actually came sometimes from family members. And I don't know that there was a bit of malice, but I feel like maybe it was just like they didn't understand how that felt, because they'd never been in our position either. So, you know, I just kind of let it slide. But then there have been other occasions where it's come up and I can feel the heat rising through my ears, because it really upsets me. Not upsets me, but it's like, I know that you're taking a piss. I know what you're doing by saying that, so I'm going to choose not to hear it that way. Anyway, yeah, so sorry, I just going to take my jacket off. If I was to say what my identity is, or how being Samoan helps or is part of my identity, it would have to be that. It's just what I am. I can't change the fact that my parents were born in Samoa and therefore I am Samoan. I can't change that. It's like, you can't take that away from me. Yeah. Was there a disconnect while we were kids because we grew up here? Probably.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to her credit, Mum tried.
She did try, and I guess because we were always spoken to in English and English was the main language, it didn't make sense to teenagers at that time to learn a different language that doesn't get spoken very often. Do you feel that was...
I think for me, I was too embarrassed. Not embarrassed in the sense that I didn't want to be someone. I was embarrassed because I just couldn't pick it up, and I didn't want to look dumb. I think that's more what it is. Not that I didn't want to learn, because to be honest, I think I really did, but I just, that opportunity didn't come about. And it's weird to sit with your mum and say, teach me someone. In saying that though, we did have some interactions with Samoans. Now, please bear in mind, when we went to primary school, there were 3 brown people. 4. 3 of them were us and our brother. And the other one was the young Indian girl in my class. Her name was Seema. No, but they'd never seen anyone else like us. They didn't know what to do with us. And this was once we'd moved. So we've moved out of the city where there's like lots of different cultures into the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, where it's changed a lot since we lived there, but there were no other national ethnicities really. if you move to Box Hill now, there's a lot of different cultures, but back then there wasn't, and especially in our primary school. So yeah, it was difficult. Do you remember that time when we walked home and those kids chased us?
No.
So our primary school was not far from where we lived. It was within 5Ks from our house. And we were walking home and these older kids, I would say grade 6, maybe year 7, were following us home, and they were saying bad things. They were teasing us. And I still remember I was checking the mailbox and our dad had actually sent us a coconut. It was a coconut postcard. It was an actual coconut. It had obviously been like cleaned up or whatever, and there was a message on it. I was like, "Love, Dad." And I actually took that coconut and I whacked one of the kids over the head with it, because he spat on me, and they were saying stuff about colour and about skin, and I just remember whacking him over the head with it, and then the other one calling me crazy, and then running away from us because,
See, I don't remember that. And we obviously were together because we were so close in age. But I feel like there are bits of my childhood that I kind of block out, like the
That
bad
could be
stuff,
it.
because I there are other instances that you talk of that I'm like, I don't remember those racist incidents. Like the only one I remember is the Chinese are coming.
Yeah. That's so funny to me because there's been several. I got spat on in class by another boy, and I jumped over the desk and bashed him. Yeah. Which now when I'm looking back on it, I mean, I know that I was defending myself and whatever. I don't have any issues with the fact that I did that. Sorry, violence. But, and now I'm like, there's this narrative that's always been around coloured people being crazy or coloured women, but I don't see that. I just see that I was being attacked by somebody and I defended myself. I got into trouble for that too. Yeah, I got into trouble. And I think you might have said something about our religion and our background and stuff, and our mum was a very staunch member and raised us that way in the church. And her way of dealing with me fighting with this person was to make me bake him a cake and drive me to his house to give him the cake and apologise. And now I think about that and I'm like, oh, that really grinds my gears. Okay, just, no, I didn't deserve my cake. And in the end, I know that boy, he never messed with me again. Mum swears it's because I gave him cake. But I'm telling you that he never messed with me again because I gave him a black eye. And that I believe that. I don't care. Turn the other cheek was the message behind that. Be kind to others. Turn the other cheek when they're doing something bad to you.
So that just reminds me of when Logan was little in school, and the teacher had told me that he was acting like a clown and jumping on the tables, and automatically I thought, Logan's wrong. I need to get him to sort himself out and make it better. Where in fact the teacher actually was not teaching to the best of their ability and didn't have the skills to manage the class wholly without corporal punishment. And so do you feel that as I don't know if it's Samoan or if it was just our family that we were taught that the child is always wrong and the person with like higher up power is always right?
I don't know. I don't know if that really. I think that's just you listen to your elders. I think that's a generational thing. I wouldn't put that down to just being Samoan, because I feel like there are a lot of kids that would, in this day and age, kids will talk back to their parents. In the time when we were kids, even my Palangi friends did not speak to their parents the way that kids speak to their parents now. And maybe that goes back to when you were talking about your story, the difference in communication. I don't know that that actually is because of a Samoan versus Samoan raised versus non-Samoan raised. I don't know if that's right. I think it's more about a generational thing, because kids were to be heard and not seen. You've heard that phrase before, right? I think that's universal. My husband, my surname now is Paraha. It's Māori. And my husband's mother actually said that to me, you know, when we were raised, and even for her kids were to be heard and not seen. So it was like, it was seen and not heard. So you had to sit quietly. So that thing about you sit quietly, you don't make too much noise in the house, you know, especially if the grown-ups are speaking, you have to be in a different room, all those kinds of things. I think that that's generational rather than just our culture. I think in all Pacific Islands there is respect held for your elders. That is probably not in some other cultures, but I think even my Hispanic friends are the same. Like you speak a different way to your elders. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that that's just because we're Samoan, but yeah. And I think for a lot of parents, if the teacher is telling you that the kid's done something wrong, the first instinct of the parent is to believe what this person says because they're in a position of power. We've got a different take on it these days because, you know, we're all understanding that kids actually have a voice, and it's a different way of communicating. Like, we'll ask our kids, how did that go? What was your experience with that? Yeah, I think even my style of parenting from when I first had kids to the youngest ones, has changed because you learn as you go, I think. I don't know how much being a Samoan has played a part in that, other than I've wanted them to know about where they're from. I think my kids have had a little bit more insight than what we did because there's more of us. There's more Samoans in Melbourne now. There's like, if you come to where we live now, which is tiny, it is a lot of different cultures: Samoan, Indian, Sri Lankan, Asian, every Filipinos, like there's everywhere, and I think that's fantastic. I love that that's the way it is for our kids. I love that they can interact with other people from different cultures, but also from their own. And I love that there are programs like the things that you do for Measina, taking it into the schools and letting them learn, and having even the Palangi students learn about Samoa and say it properly. I think when we came back from Samoa, I'll talk about that. There's another story. I was in grade 5 I had this teacher, her name's, can I say her name? She's probably dead now.
I don't know. You should say that.
Okay, well, I had this old lady, woman who was my teacher, and we were reading something, we were talking about stuff, and there was a part in the story where they were talking about fireflies. Now, in Samoa, there actually are fireflies, yeah? So we've seen them. And she asked the question, has anybody seen fireflies before? And I raised my hand and I said, yes. And she goes, where? When have you seen fireflies? And I was like, in Samoa. And because she made me feel like really as though I was lying. And I said, I saw them in Samoa. I just came from there. That's where my family's from. She goes, from where? And when she said it to me like that, when she said, from where? I got embarrassed. It made me embarrassed. And that whole thing that we were saying before about how to explain where Samoa is, you would go, it's an island. It's like, it's New Zealand and Fiji or whatever. That whole thing came over me. Like, I just felt really, oh, maybe I am making it up. Maybe, she doesn't know what I'm talking about. Now I'm embarrassed because the whole class is listening. And I felt so dumb and so stupid that I just ended up saying, never mind, I made it up. And and obviously that impacted me because I still remember it now as a 47-year-old. Like, that's frustrating. And now I just think that impacted my education and how I saw things. Like, I wouldn't speak about being from Samoa with teachers of a certain age because I didn't want to be made fun of, which is what she did essentially. She made me feel dumb and belittled me in front of our class and made it sound like I was lying. And I'm like, that's so wrong now when I'm thinking about it. And even when my kids have come and said stuff to me about their teachers, I would ask them, how did that make you feel? Or, do you know what I mean? So that's had an influence as well. But yeah, that's annoying. I don't know if that really is relevant. It feels relevant.
It is relevant because it's still happening today, and that was how many years ago. Like, you're still getting students that I'm working with who are feeling that same way, and who are acting out with violence or with backtalk because that's the only way they know how to respond. And so, yes, totally, absolutely relevant.
Yeah. I think I don't know if that's universal just for, or if that's only for Samoans. I think that also would happen for, like, even a Vietnamese student or someone from Thailand or something. Like, the fact that some teachers would never relate. They could never relate. She could never relate. She's got a concept of how and it's hard. As a teacher, like, how much of that do you take into account? Like, yada yada. And I don't want to, like, make light of it or give an excuse, but yeah, that was something that significantly impacted me. And I was frustrated as hell. And I just, let her do it. But then what could you do as a kid?
You couldn't do anything.
10-year-old. As a 10-year-old. What am I going to say?
And do you feel that you had the kind of relationship with your parents where you could have had discussions about what was happening at school at that time?
No, but then
I don't think that was something that happened in the 80s. Yeah?
I don't think anyone talked to their parents about
anything.
I don't think parents talk to their kids at all, regardless of nationality. I don't think that was something that happened. So yeah, there was that. What else?
How has your younger years story as a Samoan formed how you parent your children? She got 6 of them.
Well, there's a lot of them. I think I went into it wanting to make sure that my kids knew what Samoa was. Oh, that's Samoa. Being Samoan, you should be happy about it. Like, it's who we are. I think I wanted to deliver that message as I'm proud to be Samoan. I don't think I was for a while there because of those experiences, because I felt like
well, it would have diminished your self-esteem.
Yeah. It's not so much that I was ashamed, it was like people don't even know where that is, so how can I even explain it? I knew that that's what I was and I was happy to be that, but I felt kind of like you could only be who you are at home, if that makes sense. Like, it's not, yeah, which is so weird because we're brown and we live in a white place. It's like you stick out like a sore thumb. You're definitely not from around here, but we can't quite place where you're from. You know, that's how I felt. Anyway, that's where and a lot of people mistook that for being from New Zealand, so automatically. And I mean, I had an affinity with New Zealand anyway. We were born there. Yeah. One, we have family there. Two, and then they're like our closest, like, to make somebody understand, that's almost like the closest thing to us. And then I had a love for the All Blacks, which was also kind of strange because Mum didn't have anything to do with rugby. And, you know, I affiliated myself with them because I saw people that looked like us. They, okay, granted, they're men, but they look like my uncles. Mm-hmm. So I'm drawn to that. That's what that love of the All Blacks was for me. Because none of the other... And the Mona Samoa wasn't necessarily high profile back then, especially not over here. So that's what that was for me. I just realised that now. I saw them and I went, hey, that looks like my uncle. They look like my uncles. They could be my uncles. That's strange, isn't it? But yeah, that's what it was. And they were really good at what they did. So I just loved them. It's like, yeah, but back to the whole parenting thing. I think that, I don't know how I wanted. I kind of took on bits and pieces of what I'd learned, or like how we were raised in terms of, I don't know how to explain it. I knew that I didn't want to be as strict as my mum. Again, raised as Mormons, very strict, lots of rules. But I also knew that I wanted my kids to feel like they could choose either way. So I was not against them. I'm not a practicing Mormon anymore, but I was not against them doing that if that's where they felt like their hearts would lead them or whatever. So they've always had an opportunity to explore whatever religions they wanted to. Me, myself, I don't necessarily affiliate with any religion. I have my own spirituality. Something else that I know is common amongst Samoans, and it's very prominent, is religion. And regardless of what kind of religion it is you're system, your belief system, it all revolves around a religious belief in some capacity, right? That's I see that. You've got your White Sunday. That's very so to me, being Samoan, you have a belief system in something, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I don't necessarily go to a structured church per se, I still have a belief in some kind of some spirituality on some level. So for things like, we still say prayers as a family if we're traveling, or if there's a big event, we're having a meal together, like those kinds of things. I feel like that's a tradition across the board for Samoans. I think that's a common thing. You would see that. Yeah. So I still have that in some capacity, and with the way that I've raised my kids. I didn't force them to go to church, any type of church either. But I also didn't say that they couldn't do it. So I was like, you can decide for yourselves. So maybe that's something that influenced that. I didn't necessarily want to smack my kids. I think that was something, but as a young mum early on, I probably did take that on, and then changed. So maybe it had an impact, sort of. Maybe that shaped that. But yeah, I think I wouldn't say that being Samoan changed or molded my parenting style either way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
For good or bad. Yeah, I don't know. I gotta think about that. Maybe we could talk about that another time. What else? What else did you want?
What are some ways that you keep connected to your Samoan ancestry while here in Australia?
Well, I follow Measina Samoa. Churches of Samoa. No, I think it's probably the same as a lot of other people. I try, and we've now got social media, so there's a lot of ways that you can be connected or connect yourself. I think something else that's amazing is how there's a lot more out there to consume as opposed to when we were growing up. You can get books now. We didn't have any of that. New Zealand is probably better for that, I suppose. That I love that in New Zealand, like, kids learn a language. I would love to see that here in Australia. If kids began to learn the Indigenous languages from whatever Indigenous country they live on, that is amazing. That would be amazing to me. I would really, really. So all those politicians out there, if you want to get people on board, you'd have my vote. But I love how New Zealand has done that. They're probably a couple of steps, they're a lot further along in their journey as a country there. They have things like Samoan Language Week, Tongan Language. I really love that they do that. I think that's really something to take on board. So yeah, in terms of staying connected, that's probably one of the ways. It's I look for things. There are communities of our people now that are getting together and having things like, what do they call it, market days, and there's lots of stuff. There's that Pacific Connections Fair. There's a whole range of different things, and there's programs now. So I think it's easier now. And then the other way that I stay connected is to try and get home as much as I can. I mean, when I say home, I actually do mean I have a home here because this is where my kids and my husband, our base is. right? But for me, my heart, home is Samoa. And every time you step off that plane and the smell of Samoa hits you, and it's the sea air, I don't know, it's the heat, it's just, you get off that plane and it's there's something really almost spiritual about that for me. I don't know what the experience is like for other people, but for me, when I get off the plane in Samoa, I'm home again. It's like, that's where my heart is, my connection. So I think that's important. We recently were back home in Samoa. I think you actually did that first episode of the podcast from Samoa. So it's important. If you want to be connected to the place where your ancestors are from, you should go there sometime, at some point in your life. It is a special experience, and I'm grateful that I've been able to take all of my kids home for that reason. Also, just little things like our family on our mum's side, there's a special connection that I have with them based on the fact that we have these regular reunions as a family, and there is an opportunity for us, that thing that we do when we go to the gravesides of our ancestors and our great grandfathers and great grandmothers, and we speak about them and we hear the stories of their lives. Like, that kind of storytelling is so important. And I feel like that's our responsibility, to learn that stuff ourselves and then to keep sharing it with our kids. So, yeah, for me, that's what that is. The other thing that made me feel most connected was when we got our tualima.
Yeah, that wasn't even in Samoa.
It wasn't even in Samoa. And even now, when I just said that about sharing our stories, that was what this was about. When Tyler gave us our tualima, and the design on mine actually talks about that, sharing our stories and continuing the story. You can't really see it, but so that's a special reminder for me of where I'm from. I love now that people ask me about it. I think if I was a young kid and I had something, people would ask me and I'd be almost ashamed. Ma, even. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
About where I'm from. I would never have been able to articulate that back then. I think now, looking back on it and having kids of my own and seeing, it's like you've got a different perception of it. It does feel like you've got an obligation to help them understand where they're from and why things are like the way they are, and to teach them more about who they are and help them understand and form that identity. I think that's really important. So that's how I stay connected.
This will be our last question. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I think... Wait, how old am I now? I'll be in my 50s. I hope that I've got heaps more grandkids. I hope that I'm still able to share and speak and communicate with them and my own kids. I'd like to think that we are travelling home to Samoa more often. In an ideal world, when I have maybe retired, I'll be spending a lot more time back in Samoa. I think that's... But I can't be retired in 5 years because I'm not rich enough. So I'll still be working. But yeah, that's... Will I still be living here in Melbourne? I'm not sure. Because I actually really want to live in Queensland. Just because the weather's better. Yeah, I don't know. I would like to say I'm living in Queensland and travelling back and forth to Samoa. That's what I want.
Thank you so much for being on How to Be Samoan, the podcast, Brenda. We have learned a lot from you and your story and how you've connected to your Samoan ancestry. We hope that you don't leave Melbourne, but do travel back home to Samoa. Yes, but yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.